Have you ever loved someone who didn't even know how to love you back? This isn't a fairy tale. There's no instant chemistry, no sweeping grand gestures, just a woman who gave her heart to a man who never touched her, not once, in 3 years of marriage. But here's the twist. When she finally decided to walk away, that same man, the cold, calculated millionaire, looked at her like he was seeing her for the very first time. So take a deep breath, because this is the story of how love doesn't always arrive when you want it to. Sometimes it shows up 3 years late and fights like hell to stay. No one dreams of standing at the altar with a stranger. But Amelia Bennett wasn't living a dream. She was surviving a collapse. At just 22, with eyes too quiet for her age and shoulders already heavy with responsibility, Amelia found herself in a designer wedding gown, standing beside one of the most powerful and coldest men in New York, Liam Carter. He didn't smile when he looked at her. In fact, he didn't really look at her at all. Not the way a groom looks at his bride. His eyes, steel gray and unyielding, flicked to the justice officiating their marriage, then to the document that would bind them. A signature. A transaction. He signed the paper the way most men sign deals, efficiently, without pause, without emotion. And Amelia? She signed too, because her family's legacy, her father's life's work, a once proud publishing house, was sinking fast. And Liam's proposal had been clear. Marry me, I'll save your father's company. This is a partnership, not a love story. So she said yes, because desperation doesn't wear white roses. It wears silent surrender and polite smiles. The tabloids had a field day. NYC's most eligible bachelor finally tied down, they screamed. Mystery bride marries business tycoon. What does she know that we don't? But no one asked what Amelia felt. And Liam? He didn't care to know. Their wedding night was a silent one. No shared suite, no champagne, no whispered promises under dimmed lights. She was escorted to a separate room in his towering penthouse, where everything was sleek, spotless, and cold. That was their life for 3 years. She woke alone. She ate alone. She celebrated her birthdays alone. Sometimes she'd go days without seeing Liam at all. And even when they crossed paths, in the hallway, on opposite ends of the dining table, he was distant, polite if necessary, a nod, a glance, never more. To the outside world, they were a private couple. She prefers her privacy, his assistant would say. He's busy managing Carter Holdings. But behind those high-rise glass walls, privacy was just a beautiful word for isolation. Amelia lived like a ghost in a penthouse, made of marble and silence. She had her own schedule, her own space, her own loneliness. The chef made meals she didn't request. The driver waited to take her nowhere. The walk-in closet held dresses tailored for events she never attended. Still, she tried, once. Their first Christmas, she left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "Would you like to have dinner tonight? Just us." The response came not from Liam, but from his assistant. A gift card to a 5-star restaurant and a message that Mr. Carter would be flying to Tokyo that evening. She didn't try again, but beneath Amelia's softness, beneath the gentle nods and quiet movements, was a woman forged by fire. The girl who once dreamed of art school, of painting light into the world, had buried those dreams deep the day she became Mrs. Liam Carter. Not out of love, out of necessity. Her father, once a proud man, had sat slumped in their family living room the night he told her the business was gone. 3 generations of ink and story lost to bad investments and worse timing. Then Liam appeared, not with affection, with a solution. And Amelia? She wasn't raised to break under pressure. She was raised to endure. So she tucked her dreams away, put on the dress, and stepped into the life of a man who would not touch her, not even once, in 3 years of marriage. What hurt most wasn't the coldness. It was the absence of trying. Liam Carter never once tried to see her. Not really. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, Amelia would stand barefoot on the balcony of her suite, the city glittering beneath her like stars spilled on glass, and whisper into the wind, "One day, I'll leave, and when I do, maybe then he'll finally notice." But she didn't leave. Not yet. Not because she was weak, but because she hadn't given up on the belief that somewhere, deep beneath the surface of the man who never touched her, something still flickered. Not love, maybe not even warmth, but a human spark. What she didn't know was that it would take exactly 3 years and a single glance at her in a dress she almost didn't wear for Liam Carter's ice to begin to melt. And when it did, everything would change. It began with her name, spoken aloud for the first time in years. Amelia. He said it in the kitchen one morning as casually as if he'd been saying it every day. But the moment it landed in the room, it echoed like thunder in her chest. She turned, startled. Liam stood in front of the espresso machine, crisp in a gray suit, his hand curled around a steaming cup of black coffee. He looked exactly as he always did, impeccable, unreadable, composed, but his voice, it had trembled. Barely, but enough. Enough to matter. Amelia didn't respond. She simply waited, watched. He cleared his throat. There's a gala next weekend. I'd like you to accompany me. Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. She set her tea down slowly. Why? A flicker of hesitation passed over his face, almost imperceptible. It's expected. Of course, expected. 3 years of nothing. Of cold nods in separate bedrooms. And now she was expected to attend an event with him? She didn't answer right away. Her heart thudded in slow disbelief. She watched him sip his coffee. The silence hung like smoke between them. She waited for an explanation, for anything more. None came. Fine, she said finally, her voice cool, controlled, and yet, when she left the kitchen, her hands were trembling. That night, Amelia stood before her closet, not looking for a gown, but for herself. She chose a dress she'd never worn before. Emerald green silk, soft as breath, cut low at the back and molded at the waist. It wasn't modest. It wasn't loud. It was unapologetically hers. She didn't ask her stylist. She didn't tell Liam. She was done playing invisible. As the evening of the gala approached, something changed in the air of the penthouse. It was still quiet, still distant, but it pulsed with something different now. Tension maybe, or anticipation, a storm building under a surface of stillness. At exactly 6:30 p.m., Amelia stepped into the hallway, heels echoing softly against the marble. And then she saw him. Liam was adjusting the cuff of his black tuxedo. His hair was perfectly in place, not a strand out of line. But when he looked up, when he saw her, something cracked in his expression. He stared, not the distracted glance of habit, not the cool acknowledgement of a business partner. He stared as if he were seeing her for the very first time. "You look," his voice faltered, "beautiful." It was the first time in 3 years he had ever said anything like that. Amelia didn't smile. She simply nodded, her eyes unreadable. "Shall we?" The car ride to the gala was filled with silence. But it was no longer empty. It was charged, electric. Neither of them knew what to say, and maybe that was the beginning of honesty, when pretense had no more room to stand. When they arrived, the lights of the ballroom spilled golden warmth onto the sidewalk. Cameras flashed, voices called out Liam's name. This time, for the first time, he extended a hand toward her, and for the first time she took it. Their hands touched, brief and formal. But the contact burned through them both like fire through paper. It was just fingers, just a touch. And yet, something inside Liam Carter shifted like tectonic plates. She felt it too. The slight pause in his step, the pressure of his palm. Inside, the gala was dazzling. Chandelier light danced on polished marble. Waiters floated past with champagne and caviar, but none of it compared to the whisper that followed Amelia as she walked in beside him. "Is that Liam Carter's wife? She's stunning." I didn't even know he had one. For 3 years, she had been invisible. Now, she was undeniable. And Liam Carter, the man who commanded every room, was no longer the one drawing eyes. She was. He introduced her to investors, socialites, board members. "This is my wife, Amelia." He said her name with purpose, not as an afterthought, not as a formality, as a fact, as something he finally claimed. Amelia remained poised, graceful, but guarded, until she heard a voice from across the room. "Liam, you've been hiding your wife from us." It was Oliver Hayes, tall, elegant, with a warm smile that melted defenses. He was the kind of man who listened when people spoke, not because it was expected, but because he cared. "Amelia," he said as he took her hand, bowing slightly, "may I steal a moment of your time?" She turned to Liam. He didn't answer, just nodded stiffly. So she let Oliver lead her a few steps away. That moment, the sight of her laughing softly with another man, was when Liam felt it. Jealousy. It hit him like a wave, unfamiliar, unrelenting, and deeply human. He watched her smile, watched Oliver lean closer, watched Amelia's eyes spark with the kind of light he had never seen before, because someone else saw her. And for the first time in 3 years, Liam Carter didn't know how to handle losing control. She turned her head slightly, caught his gaze across the room. And in that gaze, she said everything without saying a word. "You're too late! And this time, I know it." The gala had been designed to dazzle. Every crystal chandelier sparkled. Every guest had been hand-selected. But no one anticipated the storm that would quietly unravel beneath the marble floors. Inside Liam Carter, he stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching his wife, the woman he'd ignored for 3 years, come alive in someone else's orbit. Oliver Hayes was charming, yes, but it wasn't the way he spoke that made Liam's fist clench. It was the way Amelia laughed. He hadn't heard that sound since... ever. And she wasn't performing. She wasn't pretending. She was being seen, truly, utterly seen. When Amelia turned to glance back at Liam, her smile faded. The lines of her jaw were graceful, her posture perfect, but her eyes, they were fire. You don't get to claim what you've ignored. And Liam knew it. Knew every inch of her radiance that night was a silent rebellion against the years he had made her small. So he did something no one expected. He walked toward her, not with his usual calculated stride, but with hesitation, like a man walking into a memory he wasn't sure he deserved. When he reached them, Oliver looked up, unfazed. "You've got a remarkable wife, Carter." Liam glanced at Amelia. "I know." But his voice cracked, just enough that she noticed. There was a pause. Then she turned back to Oliver, smiling politely. "Thank you for the conversation." Liam didn't speak as she moved beside him, but something passed between them, an unspoken war laced with years of regret, and something new, something raw, possession, maybe, longing, definitely, but more than anything, fear. He was afraid. Afraid he might already be too late. The ride home was silent again, but not the old silence, cold and vacant. This one hummed with tension, every breath between them heavy with what had gone unsaid for years. The car cut through Manhattan's shimmering streets, the city alive around them, while inside the sleek black interior, Amelia sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze distant. Liam stared ahead, but in the rearview mirror he kept glancing at her, like a man realizing the priceless painting hanging in his home had never been his to begin with. He had owned the frame, never the art. When the car pulled up to the penthouse, something surprising happened. Liam got out first, and then, for the first time in their marriage, he walked around the car and opened the door for her himself. She blinked, then stepped out, graceful, dignified, unshaken. She said nothing. Neither did he. In the elevator, their reflections stood side by side in the gold-toned glass, strangers wrapped in formality, until they weren't. When they reached the living room, soft lighting glowed from the chandelier above. Amelia stepped toward her room, heels clicking across polished floors. But Liam spoke. "Wait." She turned. He swallowed, as if the words weighed more than he expected. "You looked breathtaking tonight." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that flattery or guilt?" His jaw tightened. "It's truth." "You've had 3 years to speak the truth," she said evenly. "Why tonight?" Liam hesitated, then stepped closer. Not too close, just enough. "I don't know," he admitted. Maybe because I saw everyone else see you, and I hated it." Amelia's lips parted, but she didn't speak. Her silence was sharper than any blade. He continued, softer now. "I've built empires, Amelia, but tonight I realized something terrifying." "What?" she asked. "That I've never built a single thing that mattered without you." She stared at him for a long, still moment, and then shook her head. "You didn't see me, Liam. Not at the altar, not on our anniversaries, not on my birthdays. But someone else did, and it shouldn't have taken that to wake you up." He looked like he might respond, but then he didn't, because how do you argue with the truth? Instead, he stepped back, and she turned away. That night, as Amelia undressed in her room, the gown slipping off her shoulders like a second skin, she stood in front of the mirror and whispered to herself, "He saw me tonight, but I'm not sure that's enough anymore." Across the penthouse, Liam poured himself a drink and sat in silence. He didn't open his laptop. He didn't check his emails. He just sat there, haunted by the sound of her laughter, with someone else. And for the first time in his life, Liam Carter realized what it meant to lose something he never truly tried to keep. But fate wasn't done with either of them yet, because one moment had changed everything. And everything was just beginning. In the days after the gala, the air in the penthouse changed. Not drastically, not loudly, but quietly, like the first breeze before a storm. Liam was no longer a ghost passing through the hallways. He was present. Not fully, not consistently, but enough to be noticed. Amelia found him lingering in rooms he used to avoid. The kitchen, the shared sitting area, the studio hallway outside her door. He didn't speak much. He never had, but he looked at her, and not just at the curve of her jaw, or the clothes she wore, but at her hands as she painted, at the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, at how she stirred her tea with that absent-minded rhythm she didn't even know she had. She noticed it all, because Amelia had spent 3 years memorizing his silence. So when it changed, even slightly, she heard the shift like a crack in ice. He passed her a cup of coffee one morning, exactly the way she liked it. She hadn't told him, not once. He just knew. And when he asked, "Did you finish that book you were reading?" her breath caught, because he was listening now. Truly listening. But with every gesture, every unspoken apology, wrapped in a quiet act of kindness, Amelia's heart warred with itself. Was this real, or just guilt? She didn't dare ask, because she didn't want to hear the wrong answer. And so, she let the moments unfold slowly, carefully, like leaves opening in early spring. There was no grand declaration, no speech begging for forgiveness. But one evening, she walked into the living room to find Liam sitting on the sofa, alone, his tie loosened, his elbows on his knees. The city lights glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but his eyes were distant. He looked tired, not from work, from holding in everything. She hesitated at the doorway, then spoke. "Do you ever regret it?" He turned, startled by her voice. "Regret what?" "This marriage?" He looked at her for a long moment, then lowered his gaze. "Every day," he said softly. "But not for the reasons you think." Amelia's throat tightened. "Then why?" "Because I regret how blind I was, how cold I let myself become, and I'm scared it's too late to fix what I broke." She stepped closer. "It's not too late, Liam, but it won't be easy." Their eyes met, two storms, uncertain how to touch without destroying. He nodded, slowly. "I'm willing to try." Amelia didn't reply, not with words, but she didn't walk away either. And that was the beginning. In the days that followed, Liam began showing up differently. He asked questions, not about the company, about her. "What made you fall in love with painting? Do you remember the first book you ever loved? What color do you think hope is?" The answers were small. But the act of asking, that was monumental. He waited up for her when she stayed in the studio late. He brought her tea at night and left notes on napkins folded beside her brushes. One afternoon, she came home to find a small canvas leaning against her door. On it was a painting, not by her, but of her, or rather of her gown from the gala. The brushstrokes were clumsy, but the intention was there. The color was perfect. Deep emerald green, swirled with gold and storm gray. There was no note, just the painting. But it said everything. Then came the night it shifted again. Amelia stood by the window, watching the sun dip behind the skyline, her heart quiet for the first time in days. Liam walked up beside her, silently. He didn't touch her. He just stood there. Then he said, "That color, the sky. It reminds me of your dress that night." She turned, surprised. "You remember?" He looked at her. "I remember everything." And she believed him, because for the first time, his eyes weren't cold. They were wide open and filled with something terrifying and beautiful. Emotion. But just as they began moving toward each other, jealousy would return. Not his, hers, because sometimes the past doesn't knock. It storms in, uninvited, and sometimes the person who made you invisible is the same person you start to crave, just as someone else comes along and shows you what it means to truly be seen. The quiet between them was ending. The storm was about to begin. Amelia never expected a simple message from Oliver to make her smile. "Still thinking about that painting you described. Would love to see it someday." She was sitting in the armchair by the window, sunlight pouring through the glass, her fingers gliding across the screen as she replied, "Maybe someday." She didn't know Liam was standing behind her. "Oliver Hayes." His voice came low and cold. She looked up, calm. "He asked about a painting I mentioned." "Why is he messaging you?" Liam's voice dropped. "Because he remembered what I said," she replied without hesitation. "Something you've never cared about. You're my wife." "Am I?" She gave a small laugh. "What kind of wife gets ignored for 3 years? No questions, no thank yous, not even a glance?" Liam's fists clenched. "I just didn't know how to love." She cut him off. "I didn't need you to love perfectly. I just needed you to try. But you didn't even bother." He fell silent. "And now, when someone else sees me," she continued, "you're suddenly confused. You think I didn't care?" "No," she said. "I know you didn't." She stepped past him. "You don't get to be jealous, Liam. Not when you never even chose me." That night, Liam didn't sleep. He sat alone in his office, haunted by her words. She was right. He had stayed silent for too long, too cold, too distant. He had been afraid she'd see the real him, afraid he'd be vulnerable. So he shut down. And now that someone else saw her, he finally realized he'd been blind for 3 years. The next morning, Amelia was surprised to find Liam waiting at the dining table. No laptop, no tie, just a cup of jasmine tea, made exactly the way she liked it. "You're not going to work?" she asked. "I need to talk," he replied. She didn't answer, but took a seat. "I was wrong," he began. "I was afraid of you. You were too real, too gentle. You made me feel empty. And I didn't know how to be enough for you." She looked at him. Her eyes weren't angry anymore, just tired. "I never asked for anything, Liam," she said quietly. "I just needed you there. But you chose silence." He nodded. "I don't trust words anymore," she added. "Only actions." "Then I'll act," he said, bit by bit. In the days that followed, Liam began to change. Subtle, small steps, a warm cup of tea left by her easel, a note. "I liked the color you used yesterday." A simple, clumsy dinner he made himself. One evening she returned to find a small canvas outside her door. It was her gala dress, painted in clumsy strokes. The colors were messy, the brushwork uncertain, but on the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "I see you now. L." Amelia pressed the painting to her chest. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she simply felt. And for the first time in 3 years, she believed that maybe, just maybe, something inside him had begun to wake. The painting stayed on her dresser for days. Amelia didn't hang it. She didn't hide it either. It sat there, leaning against a vase of dried lavender, in all its imperfect, clumsy beauty. Every time she looked at it, she remembered the words scribbled on the back. "I see you now." It was the first time Liam had acknowledged her existence, Not as a duty, not as an obligation, but as a woman, an individual. She didn't forgive him yet, but she no longer looked through him like glass, and that, on its own, was a shift. That evening, a storm rolled in. Thunder rumbled over the city, and raindrops slammed against the penthouse windows like restless fingers. Amelia sat curled on the corner of the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, flipping through an old art journal. Across the room, Liam appeared with 2 cups of tea. "I didn't know which one you liked more," he said awkwardly. "So I made both." She raised an eyebrow. "You made me 2 cups of tea?" He nodded. "One with honey, one with lemon." A pause. Then she took the cup with honey. Liam sat across from her, not beside her, not too close, just near enough to be there. They sipped in silence. For once, it wasn't uncomfortable. "You know," she said softly, setting her cup down, "you weren't always this cold." Liam looked up. She gave a small smile. "I remember the first week of our marriage, before the distance settled in." He nodded slowly. "You wore a white sweater every morning, and you used to leave the sports section of the paper folded neatly beside my plate." "I thought that was the only thing I could offer you," he admitted. "Small routines," she hesitated. "Why did you stop?" He sighed. "Because it scared me, how easily I could start caring." "You didn't think I could handle that?" "No, I didn't think I could." Amelia looked away, watching the rain blur the skyline. "Do you care now?" Liam didn't answer right away. Instead, he set his cup down, walked slowly across the room, and sat beside her on the couch, not touching her, just close enough that their shoulders were almost aligned. Then he said, "Yes, I care now." Not grand, not dramatic, just quiet and true. They stayed like that for a long while, listening to the storm outside. And when the lightning cracked too close and Amelia flinched, instinctively hugging the blanket tighter around her body, Liam shifted. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "I hate thunder." Something in her voice cracked. Small, but enough. Liam stood up, walked to his room, and came back with another blanket. He draped it gently over her shoulders. Then, just before sitting back down, he paused. "May I?" She didn't turn to face him, but she nodded. He sat again, this time closer, and slowly, cautiously, placed his hand over hers, atop the blanket, a touch, barely a graze. But it was real. It was the first real touch they'd shared since the day they signed their wedding papers. No tension, no force, no transaction, just warmth, human and quiet. Amelia didn't move. She didn't flinch. Her fingers stayed beneath his. And for the first time, Liam felt something he hadn't in years: connection. Later that night, long after the storm passed, she stood in the hallway, hesitating outside her bedroom door. She could hear faint movement in Liam's room, a soft shuffle. The light from under his door glowed dim and golden. She knocked. He opened the door, surprised. "Amelia?" She hesitated. "I don't want to sleep alone tonight." His breath caught. "Not like that," she added quickly. "I just don't want silence. Not tonight." Liam stepped back. "Come in." She entered slowly, looking around. The room was neat, minimal, like the rest of the penthouse, but there was a warmth in it she hadn't expected. He offered her the side of the bed closest to the window. She took it. They lay there, not facing each other, not speaking, for minutes. Then, in the dark, Amelia whispered, "Will you hold me?" Liam turned, slowly, carefully. He slid an arm around her shoulders, pulling her gently toward his chest. She let out a shaky breath. She didn't cry. She just relaxed. And for the first time in 3 years, Amelia fell asleep in her husband's arms. Not because of obligation, not because of a contract, but because in that moment it felt safe. Sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, casting a gentle glow over the bedroom. Amelia stirred first. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The sheets felt warmer than usual, softer, safer. Then she felt the arm draped across her waist. Liam. His breathing was slow and steady, chest rising and falling against her back. She didn't move, Not right away. She stayed still, feeling the quiet rhythm of his body beside hers. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't heated. It was simply peaceful. And somehow, that made it more intimate than anything they'd ever shared. But reality crept in. 3 years of distance, the contract, the silence. It wasn't gone, just blurred for a night. She carefully slipped out from beneath the covers, trying not to wake him. Her feet hit the cold floor as she reached for her robe. "Leaving already?" Liam's voice was low, husky with sleep. Amelia paused. She turned slightly, meeting his eyes. His hair was tousled. There was no mask on his face. Just the man. The real one. "I didn't think you'd be awake," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure if you'd still be here." She looked down. "I wasn't sure either." He sat up slowly, leaning back against the headboard. "About last night?" "It doesn't change everything," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "No," he agreed, "but maybe it changed something." A long silence. Then she nodded, ever so slightly. "Maybe." Later that morning, they met again in the kitchen. The air between them was less heavy, but not yet light. Amelia stood at the counter, pouring coffee. Liam stepped in, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his palm. "I don't usually sleep that well," he said. She offered him a mug without looking up. "Me neither." Their fingers brushed. Both froze for a second, but neither pulled away. "I'd like to take you somewhere," he said. She glanced at him. "Where?" "It's a surprise," he said, then quickly added, "Nothing fancy. Just something I want to share." Amelia hesitated. This was where things could break again, where expectations return and pressure ruins progress. But something in Liam's eyes had shifted. He wasn't trying to impress. He was trying to connect. So she said, "Okay." He took her to a small, forgotten part of the city, where red brick buildings leaned against each other like tired friends, and vines crawled along rusted fences. They walked in silence. Then he pointed. A tiny art supply store, barely visible from the road. The sign above it was peeling. "This place was my mother's favorite," he said, "before she died." Amelia turned to him, surprised. "She used to bring me here," Liam continued, voice soft. "She loved to paint, oils, always landscapes." Amelia was silent, waiting. She wasn't rich. She wasn't polished, but she saw beauty in things that didn't shine. He paused. I think I forgot how to do that." Amelia looked at him differently now. Not as a husband, not as a businessman, but as a boy. One who'd lost too much too young and tried to protect what was left by turning his heart to stone. "I'm sorry you lost her," she whispered. Liam nodded. "I'm sorry I lost you, too, even while you were still here." She said nothing, but her fingers brushed his lightly. He didn't hold on. He let it be what it was, a sign she hadn't given up yet. That night, they didn't sleep in the same bed. Not out of anger, but because something real had begun and neither of them wanted to rush it. Amelia lay in her room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Liam's mother, about the art shop, about the way his voice cracked when he said her name. He was trying. Not for the contract, not out of guilt. He was trying for her. For the first time, she let herself hope. And that hope, though fragile, was enough to soften the edges of all the nights she cried alone. It started with a brush, not a kiss, not a confession, just a brush. Liam stood at the doorway of Amelia's studio, his sleeves rolled up, hands tucked into his pockets. The smell of paint and turpentine filled the room. The windows were cracked open, letting the late autumn breeze swirl through the curtains. Amelia, barefoot, stood in front of a blank canvas. She didn't look at him, but she said, "Come here." Liam approached cautiously, as if stepping into sacred ground. She held out a brush. "Paint," he blinked. "I don't know how." "I don't care." He hesitated, then reached for it. Amelia placed a palette in front of him, dotted with colors she had mixed herself. "Pick what feels right," she said. Liam dipped the brush in a soft green and swept it awkwardly across the corner of the canvas. A crooked line, hesitant. Amelia didn't laugh. She dipped her own brush into a deep amber and followed his stroke, layering, blending, guiding. They painted in silence, side by side. No words, just color. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, the canvas had become a mess of swirls and clashing hues. But to Liam it was beautiful, because she had let him in. Later that evening, they stood side by side, washing brushes. Their hands bumped in the sink. Amelia didn't move away. "You're not bad at blending," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "I had a good teacher." She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, it was almost too much. The weight of everything unsaid. The nights lost, the walls slowly crumbling. She broke the gaze. "I need to shower." He nodded, but before she turned away, she added, "Thank you for trying." He didn't answer. He just watched her walk out of the room like she'd taken every ounce of air with her. An hour later, Amelia emerged from her room, hair damp, robe loosely tied. She headed toward the kitchen and stopped. There, on the marble counter, was her favorite snack: strawberries, dark chocolate, and a glass of red wine. A note beside it, in Liam's handwriting: "You always crave something sweet after painting." Her chest tightened. He noticed. He remembered. For the first time, she let the warmth in. She carried the tray into the living room and curled up on the couch. Moments later, Liam entered, no tie, just a faded t-shirt and soft jeans. He didn't ask to sit, but when he did, she didn't object. They watched the city lights in silence. Then she whispered, "Do you regret marrying me?" Liam turned his head slowly. "Only that I waited 3 years to wake up." Her throat tightened. She set her wine down and stood. Her heart thudded in her chest, unsure of what she was doing, but unable to stop. "Come here," she said. He followed her into her bedroom. There was no desperation, no rush, just quiet. Amelia stood at the foot of the bed and reached for his hand, placed it gently on her waist. She looked into his eyes. "I'm not ready for everything," she said. "I don't expect everything," he replied. But then he leaned forward, brushed his lips to her forehead, tender, reverent, slow. It wasn't about possession, or claiming, or contracts. It was the first kiss they'd ever shared that meant something. When he pulled back, she whispered, "Stay." And he did. They fell asleep that way, fully clothed, tangled loosely beneath the sheets, hearts closer than bodies. And for the first time, neither of them felt alone. But peace never lingers too long. The next morning, Amelia woke first. She sat up slowly, smiling faintly at the sight of Liam asleep beside her. His arm was draped across her hip, his breathing calm. She slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and wandered into the living room to grab her sketchbook. That's when she saw it. Liam's phone, lit up on the table. One new message. From Julian Morris, Family Law. "Your team asked for confirmation. The prenup will automatically void in 4 months. Do you still want it dissolved?" Amelia froze. Her throat dried. She read the message again and again. The prenup, 4 months, void. The edges of her world cracked, slow and sharp. She thought of everything, every glance, every note, every soft touch. Was this real? Or was she just becoming more valuable? Because her shares were about to become his? Her heart pounded so loud she couldn't breathe. She dropped the sketchbook and walked back to the bedroom. This time, her silence wasn't soft. The door creaked open. Liam stirred under the sheets, blinking against the morning light filtering through the curtains. He smiled, sleepy, unguarded, as he reached toward the space beside him, empty. "Amelia," he murmured. No answer. Then came the soft sound of something hitting the floor. Paper, maybe. A sharp thud, followed by footsteps and silence, heavy, loaded silence. Liam sat up. She stood at the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, a familiar paper in her hand. He knew before she spoke. "You knew," Amelia said. His blood ran cold. "Amelia, you knew about the prenup voiding in 4 months. You knew this entire time." She held up his phone. "I didn't snoop. It just lit up. I saw the message." Her voice cracked. "From your lawyer." Liam rose slowly from the bed, his chest tightening. "I was going to tell you." "When?" Her voice sharpened. "After I fell into your arms? After I handed over every piece of myself and made it easier for you to collect? That's not what this is. Isn't it?" Amelia's hands trembled. She threw the phone on the bed like it had burned her. Everything was changing, she whispered. You were changing. And I started to believe, foolishly, that it was about me. Not business, not shares, not strategy. It was about you, he said, voice low and pained. Everything. Every step I took toward you was real. But you didn't say anything. Because I was scared it would ruin everything, he shouted, then immediately lowered his voice. I was scared if you knew, you'd think exactly what you're thinking now. She looked at him, eyes glistening. And yet, here we are. He moved closer, but she stepped back. I didn't fall in love with a businessman, Liam. I fell for the man who remembered my tea, who painted with me even when he had no clue what he was doing, who said, I see you now. I meant that. But now, I don't know if you saw me, or just the finish line. Liam swallowed hard. You think I planned this? His voice cracked. You think I mapped out every step, like I was just biding my time until I could get everything you had? I don't know what to think anymore, she whispered. That's the problem. He didn't chase her when she walked away, didn't beg, didn't reach for her, because part of him knew. She needed space more than anything else, and this time, he owed her that. Amelia sat on the cold tiles of the bathroom floor, her back against the door. The prenup message burned in her mind like acid. It made everything feel cheap. Every tender moment, every laugh, every time she let her guard down. But deeper than the betrayal was fear. Fear that she wanted to believe him, that a part of her still craved the man she'd glimpsed in the last few weeks. And that terrified her more than any contract ever could. That night, Liam didn't sleep, again. But he didn't sit in his office this time. He sat outside her bedroom door, knees drawn up, staring at the crack beneath it, as though willing her voice to return through it. He had rehearsed 1,000 versions of what he'd say, but none felt right, because how do you prove something is real once doubt has taken root? The next morning, Amelia found a letter. Not a text, not an email. A handwritten note left gently outside her door, folded twice. She stared at it for a full minute before picking it up. Inside, in Liam's sharp, uneven handwriting, You have every reason to question me, but I need you to know. If this had never been about money, if there were no contracts, no prenup, no shares, I still would have fallen in love with you, and I still would have failed to say it in time. That's not strategy. That's just me, being human and flawed and late. But I'm not too late unless you say I am. I love you, Amelia, with or without everything you think I wanted. Tears blurred her vision. She sat down on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in her hands, and for the first time since finding that message, her heart didn't feel like it was caving in. It felt torn, but not yet destroyed. The letter sat on the dresser, folded, quiet, still. Amelia hadn't moved it since reading it. Part of her couldn't. It felt like if she tucked it away, it might erase the gravity of what it said. But also, if she kept staring at it, she might start to believe the words meant more than they did. I love you, Amelia, written in Liam's unmistakable hand. She whispered it to herself, once, then again. It still felt foreign. Not because it was untrue, but because he'd never said it out loud. Not when she made him tea each morning. Not when she cried quietly behind closed doors. Not even the night she let him hold her. Love, on paper, was safe, distant. But love in words? That was what she needed. That evening, Liam didn't knock on her door. He didn't hover in the hallway. But he was waiting on the terrace, glass of water in hand, face turned toward the fading skyline. Amelia stepped out softly. He heard her, but didn't turn. You read it, he said. I did. Silence. The city buzzed quietly below them, neon lights flickering like distant stars. A plane crossed overhead, cutting through dusk. She crossed her arms, holding herself, not from cold, but from hesitation. I'm not angry, she said at last. Not anymore. He turned now, eyes searching hers. You should be. Maybe, but I'm tired of being angry. A pause. Liam, she continued, what you wrote. It was beautiful. He nodded. But I needed to hear it from you. With nothing between us, no paper, no silence, just truth. He stepped closer, close enough that the scent of her jasmine soap drifted to him. She looked up. Say it. He swallowed. I love you. 3 words. But they landed like thunder. Amelia's eyes shimmered. She didn't look away this time. She let the weight of them fall over her. Again, she whispered. He didn't hesitate. I love you, Amelia. Not because I'm supposed to. Not because you're kind or beautiful or make the best tea I've ever tasted. I love you because I feel safe when I'm near you. Because when you look at me, I want to be someone better. Her lip trembled. I was terrified of that, he admitted. Terrified you'd see how broken I really am. That I'm not built for softness. That I'd fail you. She stepped forward. And you did. He froze. But, she continued softly, you also came back. And that matters more than being perfect. Liam looked at her like she was sunlight he hadn't seen in years. She reached for his hand, this time her fingers laced with his. I'm not promising we'll be okay right away, she said. But if you meant what you said, we can start, slowly. He nodded. I'll go as slow as you need. They stood like that for a long while. No need to fill the space between them. Just the hum of hope returning to what had once been hollow. Later that night, Liam passed by the studio and saw the canvas they painted together. Still unfinished, still chaotic. But it looked different now. Alive. Like a work in progress, worth keeping. He stepped inside and added a final stroke of deep blue to the center. And in the softest part of the bottom right corner, he wrote with a steady hand, to beginnings that don't have to be perfect, only honest, L&A.